The rookies report today, John. We'll all be out there next week for the full roster. B and I talked about this a little bit. Remove Jaden Daniels from the conversation because he's far and away the most important. What rookies are you most keen on seeing what they can do when we get out there, and especially once they get some pads on?
Brandon Coleman.
I think that's the answer.
That was number 2.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be, right? Because the importance of that position, like I kind of feel like you got a little bit of a feel for like Samerstill, Sinnott, just in the spring and all that. It's hard to get a feel for an O-lineman without the pads on. And I'm really, because again, the importance of that position, left tackle, can he be the guy that at least provides them quality left tackle play for the next handful of years? And, because if not, then you have Cornelius Lucas, who has shown he can be a very solid backup. Can he be a long-term, full season starter? Regardless, if Coleman doesn't ascend, then you're looking at having to address that in the offseason. So I think, to me, he's the next guy, and for sure.
How firm do you think – I agree with you, by the way. How firm do you think Andrew Wiley's grip is on the right tackle spot?
That's a good question, and it shouldn't be that firm because it's not like he had a great year last year. And so I think the question is, how would you replace him? So, so that's the problem, right? If Coleman's not ready to start at the, if he's not ready to start the season, but maybe he ascends there in the middle of the year, that means you need Cornelius Lucas. And can Trent Scott be that guy, or is he just a backup, or is he a guy that even makes the roster? I don't know.
Right.
So I think there's questions there. Like, it's more about the depth than it is anything else. And I would also be curious to see how the impact of a new scheme and play calling and all that factors. But we all know at some point, both those tackles, all those guys have to sit back and block one-on-one. Can you do that? And I think there were some issues there last year with that. So, yeah.
I wonder.
I think injuries will bring a lot of that.
Totally.
Yeah, be worried about that as well, because like the depth of this team is what's going to take it where it needs to go.
Yeah. I just wonder how much Coleman, Wiley, Lucas might be battling for 2 spots. You know what I mean? Like,
possibly.
Say Coleman proves he's your left, but they think Luke looked better and they try him on the right. Those are the kind of the nerdy inside baseball things that I love during camp that they're going to try to figure out.
Well, here's the other thing. Who should be safe from the past?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now there are a few guys. I mean, McLaurin, John Allen, Deron Payne, but how many of these other guys should be safe?
I think I'd say Cosme. That's kind of the
Cosme would be on that group too, of course. Yeah, and I mean, there's Brian Robinson. There's a couple guys, of course, that are. But the overall point is, I mean, do you think that like a guy like Fedarian Mathis is a lock?
No.
Second round, is Jamin Davis a lock? I don't know. I mean, I would think that he makes it. For him, it's going to be, what do they think of him as a linebacker and the ability to blitz and all that? Plus, can he help as an edge rusher? And so, I think I'm not saying he's not going to make it, but should anybody feel that secure when you haven't done anything in a long time?
They were 4-13 last year, John. Nobody should feel secure.
BMitch, I haven't seen a lot of good teams over the years.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, again, nobody should feel comfortable, period.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
with that.
And I think a big part of why they liked Dan Quinn is he's the guy that's going to come in and make sure that's clear, that they're competing for everything.
I mean, that's been made clear to us, even with Jaden Daniels, they're not going to just give him the job. Now, I think we all know who ultimately will win the job at some point.
Right.
Whether it's, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I mean, eventually he's the guy, and we know that.
Well, dude,
they're not going to just hand it to him.
And if it is a competition, he looked better in OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
You could argue some of the quote unquote competitions we've seen don't go to the guy that looks better. Or the other guy doesn't get a real opportunity. I think last year with Brissett, he never got to run with the one, so we don't really know what that would have looked like.
Right, for sure.
But I think Jaden has looked better, and Mariota got work with the ones, and then Jaden got work with the ones. So I think they've actually held. We all knew he was going to start anyway, just by the draft position. By far though, John, the most annoying story of the summer has been Brandon Aiyuk. We're talking with our friend John Keim here on the BetQL guest line. You can follow John at John_Keim, Keim, Commanders Insider, ESPN, the John Keim Report. He's on Instagram, same name, John_Keim. What do you make of Brandon Aiyuk's now official trade request?
I think Brandon Aiyuk is doing whatever he can to get any ounce of leverage because he doesn't have a whole lot. He's under contract. And the other thing is the Niners don't want to trade him. So, he can request whatever he wants, but if they don't want to trade him, he's either got to report or not play.
The fine that they can give him, I think he's going to report.
40 G's a day.
Yeah, now they can waive that, but but you don't know. But yes, I agree. So the ball, he does not have the leverage here, and everything that he's done this over the offseason, I think he's even talked about that in some interviews that he's doing what he can to create leverage. So he's not winning with that because the Niners aren't engaging in trade talks. The end. I mean, so and the other thing is they have a history of not signing these guys to long-term deals until I think there's 4 or 5 of them, including Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, where they've signed them after this point to long-term deals. This has been their MO. So, yeah, that's what I make of that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, man. I think throughout this has pretty much been contract negotiation 101. I think the only real mistake, and I think it really reflected poorly on Jaden as kind of a welcome to the league, time to grow up moment, was the practice film that he posted to TikTok. Yeah. What are you doing, man?
That's a good question. And, I don't know, is that commonplace that guys share that stuff? I don't know, but that was not what you want. So, and it's certainly not what you want public. So, but yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
I mean, it looks bad, but I don't think it's nothing that serious because believe me, every team has more than that one pitcher.
Sure.
Oh, for sure.
Of this team. But Jaden has to understand that when a guy is trying to promote himself, you have to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, the other thing is they may have that, they do scout these teams. They know a lot of what Cliff Kingsbury is going to run. I mean, there are wrinkles and all this and all that. I get it. But, but yes, I agree with what you say, BMitch. Yep.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, man. I do think optimism is running so high for the organization. But I hope it. B and I had this event last night at Lost Rhino, Johnny, and a lot of fans were like, "Man, go get Aiyuk. They haven't done anything in so long." And it's for fans that have sat here and watched bad football and roster turnover and coaches and all that, they're like, "Yes, go do something. We want it done." But you got to remember, Harris and Peters just got here.
Yeah. Right.
Totally.
They're looking at a long runway to build this the right way.
And this is their honeymoon year. So they can take the approach that they feel is best, and if they're 3-14, you're going to have to adjust. Mm-hmm. But I think you're going to stick to that. And, the whole thing with Aiyuk, again, great player. We all know that. It's not a debate. Is he a good player or not? Would he help your team or not? Yes. What are you willing to give up for a guy like that? And, because the Niners want to win a Super Bowl. They're not going to take him for a future 2 and a 3.
No, right.
They're not going to, you know what I mean? This isn't, you can't be in fantasy land with that. So what do they want? They want impact players who can help them win a Super Bowl.
If they get players, if they trade for something that's going to hurt your team, that's the problem.
Yes. And then so here's the other part of it too. If I'm Washington, what have we seen them do? What have we heard them preach this offseason is building a certain way, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, the foundational pieces are the draft picks and all that. And they, so if you go, let's say they had traded, if you trade before the draft, they weren't going to do that because Niners wanted a high pick and they're not giving up number 2. So, but let's say the Niners would accept high picks now. What are you willing to give up? If you're the Niners, you don't have to trade them. So you're only going to trade them if you get wowed by a deal. that would include a first-round pick. So if you're Washington, where is that first-round pick in 25? Do you know? Do you know where this team is at? There's so many questions about them that I think you can all be optimistic about the future of this franchise. But we don't know about this year because there are questions along the offensive line. We don't know, Jaden Daniels, what kind of impact, what kind of immediate impact will he have? The corners, where are they at? So, you may need certain things in the offseason to bolster the roster. Does paying $28 million plus giving up at least one high pick and another pick, does that help you get there? And what you know what I mean? I know you'd be getting an impact player, but you're still going to need, certain spots. And I just think that a year into this, you may be better suited to make a bold move like that. But again, the Niners aren't wanting to engage in.
They're not budging.
You saw Houston do it, right? They realized, oh my God, Stroud's awesome. Let's trade for Steph Diggs. But you don't make the trade before you know the guy is awesome.
Right. And again, how good do we, I think they know, they knew this roster needed a lot of work. Right. They know that this isn't a one off-season fix.
4-13 with no Pro Bowlers. Sometimes you have a year where it completely falls apart because the quarterback gets hurt. You have a good team, and then your quarterback goes down, and you're screwed. That wasn't the case last year.
No, it wasn't. And so, so you don't. If let's say they win 7 games, I think if you win 7, you're competitive and you look good. You're looking competitive, and you're looking like, hey, you know what? Jaden Daniels is going to be the guy. Mm-hmm. All right. So now you feel pretty good, and now you can go do some things because you figure you take that second-year leap. And, because you maybe Coleman is the answer at left tackle. If you get those questions answered, now you feel more confident about making some more immediate impact moves.
Agreed.
Than I think you would right now when you're very early in the process. And as good as Aiyuk is, again, whatever you give up for him, it's going to hurt you. It's not a, oh my gosh, he wants out. Give him a 3rd and a 5th. No.
Yeah. And you got to be careful with that type of mindset of a guy that wants to be out right now. Hell, he'll be like that with you next year.
Totally.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something kind of different, and I don't think we've ever talked about this, even in the press room, just the two of us BSing. You grew up in Cleveland. You're a huge Indians Guardians fan, right? They're having an awesome year, best record in the AL. It was cool watching the All-Star game the other night, and see some of those young Cleveland players that are really good that I'm not that familiar with. Brian and myself to a lesser degree, there's a lot of consternation about the Commanders' name. But if they got good, if they won some games, we both think the name would start to sound a lot more familiar.
Right.
As a lifelong Cleveland fan, with the best record in the American League, they're 21 games over 500, your Guardians. They're good.
Right.
Has the name gotten easier for you to hang out with?
I think you slowly get used to it. I will say there's a couple of differences here. One, while definitely fans there want the owners to spend more. Now, David Blitz is now part of that ownership group, but they wanted the Dolans to spend more. That's always been a consternation, but it's also been one of the better organizations in sports over the last 10, 15 years. You just look at the track record, they've been a really good franchise. So there's not the same level. Here, the owner was hated for a different reason. It wasn't about because of his ability to spend. It was because of everything else. And he was just bad.
Yeah.
So I think, that's part of it. That's for sure part of it. And then the other part of it too is I remember watching the first game when they were called the Guardians, and I turned it on and my first thought was how's Jose Ramirez going to look, right? Because they looked like the same team. It wasn't about the name. It was about are they going to be any good this year or not? And I'm watching I'm watching them, the jerseys look the same. Uh-huh. I always felt here they made a big mistake in trying to change too much. Mm-hmm. And, it's one thing to change the look, but when you change the look and the name, now it felt for me, watching a different team.
I just pulled it up and looking at, I assume those are the home whites with the Guardians with the underline. It looks like the Indians jersey did. Yeah. That's a good point.
The hat is the same. The hat is very similar. So to me, that's off the boat. That's not to say I definitely hear from people. I've had some fans try to fansplain me this because I'm like, dude, I am from Cleveland. I know people there. My family's from there. I still go back up there. I know some people don't like the name.
Right.
But I also know that people are showing up. They have record attendance for the first half, like their best attendance for the first half of the season since like 2008. So winning matters.
Well, and that park is awesome.
You know what you can look at too, John? All these people here that like to say, "Oh, I'm not going to support because of the name." They were losing with the name, and you weren't showing up. So I don't know why the name is such a. It's about if this team is better, people will show up. Point blank.
In 2018, Tarek El-Bashir and I are at Dulles Town Center Mall watching Josh Norman hand out tickets when they're 6-3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They were called the Redskins then. They were handing out tickets to get people to go to the game. So, and that's like, I get some of the consternation. I get the disappointment over it. I understand all that, but I'm not going to sit here and think that like, if you just change it back, which they're not going to do, but if you just change it back, that it's all going to solve every problem. And maybe for some, and maybe they'll feel like they're watching, the same thing, but are people showing up or not? Like,
right.
You've got to win and put a good product on the field for them to do that. If it's called the Redskins, the Commanders, or the Washington BMitches, you got to put on a good product.
That was
I kind of like the Washington BMitches.
Yeah, I like that one.
It's called the Washington Bees.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't put out a good product in a long time.
Totally.
Test the and I get I mean, I saw when the Browns moved, I had friends who said I can't root for them again because it's just different now, and I get it. Like, I'm not going to blame those fans if it doesn't feel the same. When they were the football team, I felt like I was still watching the same team because it was just the football team was such a small part on their jersey.
Right.
But you felt like the idea to go to an Arizona Cardinals type look was a mistake. You know what I mean? Like, and I think people there know that. And so, I think that if you can go back to an old, the former look, I know maybe not everybody wants that. I don't know. And you're not going to please everybody. Listen, whatever let's say in 2 years they decide, you know what, it's just not working with Commanders. We're going to change the name. Are people really going to embrace the new one after that?
Probably not.
If they go to an NFC title game, they might. John, we got to break, man.
Win, and people will be happy, whatever they're called.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
See you next week.